There's a corner of your home you avoid looking at after dark. You walk past it quickly on your way to the bathroom. You turn your eyes the other way when you reach for the hallway light, and you've told yourself it's grief that makes you hurry by. This time, listen to what it's really saying. Why do your prayers for him seem to stop halfway? Why do you arrange masses, pray the entire rosary, offer up your sacrifices, and still feel deep down that the comfort you promised your departed loved one is falling short? There's one exact spot inside your home that has remained open all this time. A spot that Saint Teresa of Jesus described in words the Church almost kept under wraps. And July 11th will change everything once and for all. For years now, you've been doing the right things. The anniversary Mass, the Rosary, a candle lit every few days. And still, there are nights when you wake up with the feeling that something was left undone, as if your departed loved one was still waiting for something specific that you haven't given him yet. Today I'm going to tell you what is missing. And before I forget, one thing, just one thing. When you reach the very end, write down there in the comments the first name of the person to whom you want to offer every word of this journey. Just the first name, quietly, the way you pray inside your heart. What you're about to discover today was taught by Saint Teresa of Jesus inside her own convents. The Church later preserved it, and almost nobody applies it in the one place where it actually changes something. Stay with me. Every word that follows was kept for you. We have to begin by naming what's happening to you, because what has no name cannot be healed. And what you carry inside has a name the Church has known for 1500 years. It's called incomplete prayer. This is not the same as prayer offered with distractions or with lukewarmness. Those get straightened out quickly with an act of contrition or a fresh burst of fervor. Incomplete prayer works differently. You offer it with your whole soul, and even so, it keeps circling, never quite arriving because it is missing one piece. And that piece has to do with a specific spot inside your home, not with the quality of your faith, not with the depth of your love for the one who left. Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote about it with that clarity of hers that sounds plain on the surface and carries centuries of monastic tradition underneath. There are prayers the soul offers from a clean place, and they rise straight up like a column of incense. There are others it offers from a place that drags weight along with it, and they rise in spirals, losing strength with every turn. And there are some that keep circling around a point nobody has ever closed. Those are the prayers you are making for your departed loved one. That is why, even though you make them every day, you feel in your chest that they stop halfway. Let me explain where this teaching comes from. In Catholic spirituality, every physical place has a spiritual dimension. That truth has belonged to the whole Church from her earliest days, long before the Doctor of Avila wrote a single line. That is why we bless homes. That is why we sprinkle holy water in our rooms. That is why we consecrate altars with the oil of bishops. Matter matters. Space matters. The place where something happened matters, above all, if that something was the passage of a soul from this world to the next. When a person dies inside her own home, a trace remains in the physical location of that death. A trace that Catholic tradition has tended to for centuries with very specific rituals. The priest who arrived to administer the holy oils did much more than anoint the dying person. He also blessed the entire room. He sprinkled the bed with holy water. He traced the sign of the cross on all four walls, facing the cardinal points. He pronounced over the bed formulas the Church has preserved in her most ancient rituals. All of that had meaning. All of that had a very real reason behind it. Today, things have changed. Today, far too many people die in hospitals surrounded by machines. Today, many families don't call the priest in time. Today, even when he is called, the rush of the hospital setting keeps things from being done with the care of earlier generations. And when the body comes home for the wake, It's already too late for many of those blessings that needed the bed still warm. The room, the bed, the very corner where the soul said its goodbye, that place is left unsealed. And that absence of a seal is exactly what you feel, even if until today you couldn't quite put words to it. Think for a moment about your own experience. Think of that room in your home where your father, your mother, your husband, your son, whoever it was you grieve, lived his final months. Think of that bed where he slept his last nights. Think of that specific corner. Is there something there that weighs differently from the rest of the house? Is there a silence in that spot that stands apart from the silence of the other rooms? I know it, and so do you. Anyone who has lost someone within the walls of her own home knows it. What happens there? Saint Teresa of Avila described in a passage from the book of her life that very few readers ever underline. She spoke of the soul that goes and the body that stays, and of the space that opens between the two during the minutes of the passing. That physical space, where the last heartbeat met the first eternal breath, never again becomes an ordinary space, according to a paraphrase preserved by her confessors. She compared it to a door left ajar. The word she uses is exact. A door left ajar is neither fully closed nor fully open. It doesn't belong to the inside or to the outside. It creaks when the wind picks up. It swings when a draft comes down the hallway. It catches whatever passes near it, and it lets the warmth slip out without warning. A door left ajar is the most spiritually dangerous thing there can be inside a home. A closed door protects. A door deliberately kept open lets grace in. A door left ajar lets any draft pass through and carries off any warmth without your even realizing it. That is what is happening in that corner of your home you've been avoiding head-on for so long, especially when night falls and the house grows quiet. There is something concrete you can do. There is an ancient seal approved by the Church for centuries that the mystical doctor of Avila taught her nuns to use for closing exactly that kind of door left ajar. It carries the name of a 6th century saint engraved on both faces of the metal. It carries an exorcism prayer that Christianity has carried with it since its earliest days. And it has one specific day on the liturgical calendar that multiplies its grace, a day that is now just a short while away. Before I tell you what that seal is, you need to understand who the saint is, whose name is engraved on it. Because if you don't grasp who he was, you won't grasp why his medal carries that particular power over places of passage. And if you don't grasp that, you'll make the gesture without faith, and a gesture without faith remains just a gesture. What you're about to hear is the life of the man whose name, engraved on a small disc of metal, closes doors that have been left ajar inside homes for years. In the mountainous region of central Italy, around the year 480 of our era, a child was born whom history baptized with a name that means blessed. Benedictus in Latin, Benito in Spanish, Benedict in English, Saint Benedict of Nursia. His family belonged to the well-off houses of the valley. Roman patricians who had lost ground because of the barbarian invasions, with lands still in their name, and a family name that carried weight in the region. When the boy turned 14, they sent him to Rome to be educated in letters, in law, in the careful Latin still spoken in the few schools that were running in the Eternal City. Rome, in that moment, was a shadow of what it had once been. The forums lay in ruins. The basilicas were beginning to be Christian and still carried the air of the pagan temples on top of which they had been built. The youth of the great families had given themselves over to a dissipated life that mixed imperial luxury with the decadence of the collapsing empire. Benedict watched all of that for a few years, and it truly frightened him. What truly terrified him was the spiritual danger he saw opening up before each one of his classmates. Sons of the finest Christian families of the city, being pulled toward pleasures that were slowly eating them from the inside. And he understood that he, if he stayed there, would end up the same. One night, without telling anyone except his faithful nurse, he left Rome on foot and headed east into the mountains of Subiaco, looking for solitude so as not to lose himself. In Subiaco, he found a cave, a small cave, dark, almost impossible to reach, wedged between rocks, accessible only by lowering yourself down on a rope. There he spent 3 years in continual prayer, eating bread that a neighboring monk named Romanus lowered down to him in a basket tied to a cord. 3 years barely speaking to anyone. With the walls of the cave as his only company, the rosary of the liturgical hours he prayed from memory, and the murmur of the river Aniene running below. Out of those 3 years, a transformed man emerged. The shepherds of the area began to talk about him. The fame of the young hermit reached a nearby monastery that had lost its abbot. The monks begged him to take the position. Saint Benedict accepted out of obedience. Those monks were lukewarm, comfortable, no friends of the rigor he brought with him from Subiaco. And when they saw that the new abbot intended to bring back the old discipline, they decided to get rid of him. One day, during the noon meal, they set down before him a jug of poisoned wine. Saint Benedict, before drinking, did what he always did at every meal. He traced the sign of the cross over the jug, slowly, pronouncing a blessing over the table. And the jug, according to the second dialogue of Saint Gregory the Great, shattered into pieces as though it had been struck by an invisible blow. The poisoned wine spilled across the stone floor of the refectory. The poisoning monks froze in their places. Saint Benedict stood up without saying a word, gathered his cloak, and went back to Subiaco to pick up his prayer where he had left it. That episode, written down by Pope Saint Gregory the Great barely 50 years after it happened, marked the first of many visible victories of the cross over evil in the life of the Saint of Nursia. The dialogue records similar episodes throughout his entire life. The cross, in Saint Benedict's hands, undid poisons. It drove off demons. It restored water to dry wells. It healed the sick. The sign of the cross, pronounced by his lips with the formula he had learned in the cave, held a power over evil that his contemporaries saw with their own eyes and set down in writing in the dialogues. From Subiaco, Saint Benedict later traveled south, founded the monastery of Monte Cassino on top of an old pagan temple of Apollo, and there wrote the rule that bears his name. A brief rule, sound, full of spiritual common sense, that would become the foundation of Western monasticism for 1500 years. Prayer and work, ora et labora, the day measured by the liturgical hours, the care of the place as the care of the soul, hospitality received as though Christ himself were arriving. All of that he set down in the rule, copied afterward by thousands of monks in thousands of monasteries scattered across Christian Europe. Saint Benedict died on his feet, held up by his brothers, while praying in the chapel of Monte Cassino. It was the 21st of March in the year 547. For centuries, the church celebrated his feast on that date. Then in 1969, Paul VI moved the liturgical celebration to July 11th, the date that commemorates the transfer of his relics from Monte Cassino to the French Abbey of Fleury in the 7th century. That July 11th is today the feast of Saint Benedict on the entire liturgical calendar of the Universal Church, a feast that the very same Paul VI, 5 years earlier in 1964, had elevated to the rank of patron of Europe. And here is where Saint Teresa of Jesus enters the story. The Castilian woman from Avila held the Benedictine rule in the highest regard from her youth. Her own uncle Francisco had been a monk of the order. The first teachers of her childhood, the Augustinian sisters of Santa Maria de Gracia, formed their pupils by reading passages of Saint Benedict aloud. And when she, by then deep in the reform of the Discalcet Carmel, began to shape the life of her new foundations, she did something very specific with the medal of the Saint of Nursia. Something almost nobody has read about, because it sits in the internal annals of the order rather than in her better-known books. Something that touched directly on the place where her nuns slept and on how that spot was spiritually protected through the long hours of the Castilian night. Now move forward exactly 1,000 years. The cave of Subiaco has become a bustling monastery. Saint Benedict is venerated all across Europe. His medal has been approved by Pope Leo IX and circulates through monasteries from France to Poland. And in a small walled city of Old Castile, a Carmelite nun walks into her 6-square-meter cell after night prayer. The year is 1562. The city is Avila. That nun is Saint Teresa of Jesus. By that year, Saint Teresa of Jesus had already lived through the spiritual experience she herself would later narrate in chapter 31 of the book of her life. Episodes of direct diabolical attack with a recognizable form that took place in specific spots of her cell and her convent, and which she, with that practical clarity she had for spiritual matters, eventually understood in a very precise way. What she described in that chapter was this: there were nights when she sensed a heavy presence in a particular corner of her cell. There were others when she heard knocks on the wooden door with no one on the other side. There was one early morning when she saw, as she herself described, a dark figure leaning against the kneeler where she usually prayed. And what surprised her most was that this presence always came back to the same corner, the same kneeler, the same wall. Saint Teresa of Jesus was far too steady a woman to slip into spiritual panic. She responded with ancient instruments of the Church, holy water, the sign of the cross pronounced slowly, minor exorcism prayers that any priest could teach a cloistered religious. And she wrote down in her own words that demons feared holy water even more than the simple cross. She said it with the plainness of someone who had tested it. But the truly important thing about chapter 31 is what came afterward, the understanding she drew from those battles. And that understanding was this: the enemy of the human soul operates in concrete places. He has a geography. He looks for specific points in physical space that give him some advantage. And the points that interest him most are those where a soul has been on the verge of crossing to the other side, or has already crossed, or returns, often in prayer. Saint Teresa of Jesus, in the years that followed those attacks, assisted as prioress at several passings of sisters dying in the convents she was founding. She saw how a soul separates from the body. She saw how the atmosphere of the place where it happened changed. And she began to understand that those physical places, the cells where her sisters died, kept afterward a spiritual quality that needed to be tended in a different way from the rest of the convent. What she taught there came out of respect and the practical discernment of someone who has seen things firsthand, far removed from any shadow of superstition. One of the things she saw with her own eyes, as preserved in the internal chronicles of the order, took place in the convent of Medina del Campo. A young sister there, named Catalina del Espiritu Santo, died after a long illness. The sisters kept vigil over her all night. In the days that followed, several of them reported to the prioress that the corner of the cell where the bed of the departed sister had stood was dragging a weight that wasn't there before. Whoever walked in felt something. Whoever went to pray at the foot of the empty bed noticed that prayer was harder. Saint Teresa of Jesus, with the experience of the book of her life now settled in her, understood at once what was happening. Here comes the detail that almost nobody underlines when reading Teresian mysticism. She taught her nuns in every foundation to tend in a concrete way to the places where a sister had died: the bed where the soul had expired, the wall against which the headboard rested, the wooden frame that held up the poor canopy of the bed. Those physical points, as she herself indicated in letters preserved in the archive of Alba de Tormes, needed to receive a specific spiritual treatment, ancient, approved by the Catholic Church for centuries. The Saint Benedict medal with the exorcism engraved on both faces. Why precisely that medal and not another, and not a different sacramental? Because Saint Teresa of Jesus had understood something the Catholic doctrine carries from the dialogues of Pope Saint Gregory the Great onward. The most effective attacks of the devil in physical space are neutralized with the signs he fears most. And of all the sacramental signs the Church has approved over the centuries, none concentrates exorcism with the density of the cross of Saint Benedict. It carries the Vade Retro engraved on its four arms. It carries the crux Sacra Sit Mihi Lux as its upper inscription. It carries the name of the saint whose simple gesture of blessing shattered a poisoned jug in front of murderous monks. That is what Saint Teresa of Jesus chose as the seal for the places of passage in her convents. That is what her nuns learned to place on the very spot we will name with full detail in a moment. That is what the Church, 200 years later, would gather into a specific blessing of the Ritual Romanum that any priest can still pronounce today over a new medal. And that is what you are going to learn to place inside your home. On the exact spot where the soul of your departed loved one separated from the body. Or, if it didn't happen at home, on the equivalent spot that she herself pointed out for those modern cases in which so many souls die far from their own bed. Before I walk you through it step by step, there is still one more detail you need to understand. A detail that will change forever the way you look at the headboard of that bed. I'm going to tell you now. You've been waiting a while for this part. The exact spot in your home where Saint Teresa of Jesus taught us to place the medal of Saint Benedict for a departed loved one is the headboard of the bed where that person slept her last nights. The headboard. The frame of wood, iron, or wall that held up her head while she slept her final days in this world. And within the headboard, the central point, the one that sat exactly above the crown of her head when the body rested face up. Look around your home for a moment. Look down the hallway. Look at the door of that room you've been closing with a flick of the wrist a little quicker than necessary. Behind that door is a bed. Maybe it's still there with the sheets made up the way they were on that last night. Maybe you swapped it out months ago for a new bed, or maybe you left the whole room exactly as it was. It doesn't matter. The physical point in space where that headboard stood is still there. Even if you've moved the furniture around, space remembers, and the wall, above all, remembers. Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote about this in one of the chapters of The Way of Perfection that few readers reread slowly. She spoke of the resting place of the body and the resting place of the soul, and of how the Church has always tended to both with different sacramentals. For the sick body, the holy oils. For the dead body, the funeral rites and the cemetery. But there is a third space she pointed out specifically in a paraphrase preserved in letters to Mother Ana de Jesus, and it is this: the place where the body and the soul were separated. That spot, she said in her own words, goes on for years asking for something that no funeral ever quite gives it. It asks for a small seal, concrete, of its own kind. Why precisely the headboard and not some other point in the room? For a reason with centuries of Catholic tradition behind it. The headboard is the point of the bed closest to the head, and the head is the last part of the body to grow cold when a soul separates. The ancient rituals of the Church, still preserved in the Rituale Romanum, include the anointing of the forehead as the final point of the sacrament of the sick. The forehead precisely, because the forehead is the body's last frontier, and the headboard of the bed is the material extension of that frontier. What happened in the soul of your departed loved one in his last heartbeat happened at the level of his forehead, against that particular wall of your home. There are other places in the room that seem just as important, or even more so. And it's worth seeing why Saint Teresa of Jesus set them aside for this particular gesture. The cross in the living room serves another purpose, a continual presence in the daily life of the family. It doesn't carry the specific power to seal a point of passage, because it wasn't there at the moment of passage. The crucifix on the nightstand, for its part, may have received the dying person's last glances, but it is a movable object that has been shifted from spot to spot dozens of times. The cemetery, in turn, receives only the body. The soul, at the instant of crossing over, separated from the body inside your home, far from the cemetery grounds. The cemetery receives the bones. The headboard of your bed received the soul. That is the difference that changes everything. And it is the difference that Saint Teresa of Jesus, with that theological clarity she had without ever having studied at Salamanca, was able to discern when she watched how her sisters died in the convents she was founding across Castile. The soul separates from the body at a precise point in space. That point is marked forever. And that physical point has a very precise architectural name, the headboard of the bed. Stop here for a moment. Close your eyes if it helps you. And picture the headboard of that bed in your home. Do you see it? The dark wood headboard maybe, or wrought iron, or the whitewashed wall where your father, your mother, your husband rested the back of his head. Is there something hanging above it? Probably a small crucifix, a holy card of the Virgin, a framed wedding photo. Things the children, the grandchildren, the spouses put there with the very best intentions in the world. But none of those things seals the point of passage the way the Saint Benedict medal seals it. Because none of those things carries engraved on it the Vade Retro Satana exorcism, formulated by the Church since the 6th century, approved by Pope Benedict XIV in 1742, linked to the saint whose gesture shattered a poisoned jug before his lips ever touched it. And now comes a question that may be burning inside you. What if the headboard of the bed no longer exists? What if the room was remodeled years ago? What if your departed loved one died in a hospital or a nursing home far from his house? What if the bed where he slept his last nights is no longer in your home because they took the bed away, the room was emptied, the door was closed for good? There is an answer for every one of those cases. There is an equivalent spot for every modern situation. And Saint Teresa of Jesus, with that anticipation mystics seem to have about the future of their church, left precise instructions for those exceptions. You'll hear those instructions in just a few minutes. First, you need to learn how the exact gesture over the headboard is made, because placing a medal calls for far more than nailing an object to a wall. It has a form, a preparation beforehand, a specific prayer that is spoken while it is being done, and a way of fastening it that tradition has preserved. If you do it without preparation, it stays at the level of superstition. If you do it with preparation, it becomes an active sacramental. And the difference between the two, you will feel yourself in your own home in the nights that follow July 11th. The first thing is the medal itself. Without the medal, there is no gesture. You want to get it carefully because there are imitations that only carry a plain cross engraved on them and lack the letters of the exorcism. The genuine Saint Benedict medal has on one face the Saint of Nursia, holding the cross in his right hand and the rule in his left. The other face has the cross engraved with 4 large letters at the corners of the arms, C, S, P, B. And underneath, beneath the horizontal arm, a line of letters that look like loose initials, V, R, S, N, S, M, V, S, M, Q, L, I, V, B. Each letter is the first letter of a Latin word from the exorcism. Vade retro satana, crux sacrasit mihi lux. That set of letters is what makes it what it is, and what sets it apart from any other medal in the Catholic catalog. You can find one at any decent Catholic bookstore, at any Benedictine monastery where the sisters sell them for a few dollars, in religious shops attached to cathedrals and basilicas. It can be made of aluminum, of bronze, of silver, of gold. The material adds nothing to and takes nothing from its spiritual power. A blessed aluminum medal has exactly the same sacramental grace as a blessed gold medal. What matters is the integrity of the engraving and, above all, the blessing that comes next. Here comes the most crucial step of all. An unblessed medal is a pretty piece of religious jewelry with an interesting engraving. A medal blessed with the proper formula from the Rituale Romanum is an active sacramental with the real power of the Church behind it. And the difference between the two is made by a priest pronouncing the correct prayer. Ask your parish priest for it. If he doesn't know it by heart, it's enough to say that it's the blessing of the saint. Benedict medal, and he'll find it in any priestly ritual book he has on hand. It is a specific blessing, distinct from the generic blessing used to sprinkle religious objects together in a group. It has had its own formula since the approval of Benedict XIV in 1742. Ask the priest to bless it specifically with the intention that it be placed as a seal over the bed of a departed loved one. With that indication, you've said enough. Any priest with even basic formation will understand what you are asking. If you have the chance to ask him to bless it on July 11th itself, after the Mass of Saint Benedict, even better. That blessing on that day multiplies the grace of the sacramental. Then you take the medal home wrapped in a piece of clean white cloth. Cotton, linen, whatever you have. The cloth keeps the blessed medal from touching profane objects during the trip. A small detail that the Carmelite nuns kept with scrupulous care, as is preserved in the convent sacristy manuals. Now you walk into the room of your departed loved one. If the room has been closed up for a while, you open the window first. Let fresh air in. Let light in. Then you go up to the headboard of the bed. You find the central point, the one that sat exactly above the crown of the head when the person rested face up. If the headboard is wooden, that point is usually in the middle of the upper crosspiece. If it's wrought iron, at the central crossing of the design. If it's a whitewashed wall, at the point about 4 inches above where the back of the head used to rest. You pick up the blessed medal with clean fingers. The face with the cross faces outward, toward you when you walk into the room, toward the open space of the room. The face with the figure of Saint Benedict faces the wall, keeping watch from within. You fasten it with a small white ribbon tied to the frame, or hung from a discreet nail, or attached with an invisible adhesive if the wall is smoothed. The exact height can vary by an inch or so. What matters is that it stays centered with respect to where the head of your departed loved one used to rest. In the same gesture of fastening it, you pronounce in a low voice, slowly, this prayer. You pronounce it in full, without skipping a single word, and you hold it as your fingers finish placing the medal. The prayer is this: by the most precious blood of Christ, by the saving cross of Calvary, by the protection of my Lord, Saint Benedict the Patriarch, seal, O Lord, this place of passage through which your servant, full first name, crossed to the other side of life. Grant him eternal rest. Free his soul from every bond. Keep watch over this place of my home with your peace that surpasses all understanding. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. That prayer is spoken once during the fastening. Then you take a step back. You stay looking at the medal in place for the length of 3 slow breaths, without thinking, letting the gesture settle. And you make the sign of the cross over your chest slowly, completely, while saying the name of your departed loved one quietly one last time. That night, if you can, light a candle at the foot of the bed, just one, of white wax, with no scent or decoration. Leave it burning for the time it takes you to pray 3 mysteries of the Rosary, seated or standing near the headboard. Then you put it out, close the room gently, and go to your own room to sleep without opening that door again until the next morning. That gesture, made once, doesn't expire. The Church's blessing on the sacramental remains. The medal stays there doing its job day and night for years. And the next morning, when you walk back into that room with the first light, you will sense something different. That sensation is the first of many things that change inside your home and inside the soul of your departed loved one, from the exact moment the seal is in its place. The first signs are small, so small that an inattentive ear lets them slip by. The first thing you'll notice, almost without meaning to, is the air of the room. That room that had been dragging along the smell of a closed-up space, a subtle heaviness that worked itself into your clothes, a feeling on walking in that something was pushing you to leave as soon as possible. That dies down quickly. A week after July 11th, when you go in to open the window, you'll realize you walk in with a different step, without the hurry you used to have, without the automatic wish to leave, and the room smells different. Of nothing in particular, simply of a room that is alive. The second thing that changes is your nights. You've spent months, maybe years, sleeping with a discomfort you could only put words to at 3 in the morning when you'd wake up for no apparent reason and stare quietly at the ceiling. That hour loosens its grip. You'll still wake up some nights, of course, because grief doesn't leave with an object placed on a wall. But you no longer wake up with the weight pressing on your chest. You wake up with the calm of someone who has just dreamt something peaceful. And if you have the devout habit of saying, "And our Father," when you wake at that hour, you'll feel that our Father enter a current that was blocked before. The third thing, which is the most subtle and the most important of all, happens inside your prayer. The prayer you offer for your departed loved one changes in texture. That feeling we described at the start, of your prayers circling halfway, dissolves little by little, the way a thick cloud begins to come apart into wisps, letting the light come through gaps that grow steadily wider. Weeks will pass, maybe a whole month, until one day you find yourself praying the rosary for him or for her, and you notice in your chest a calm you'd gone a long time without feeling. That calm is the sign. Your prayer is getting through. Your prayer is arriving. And the fourth, what happens in the soul of the departed loved one, you will know only through its effects, because the souls in purgatory, in the Catholic doctrine that Saint Teresa of Jesus taught so deeply, receive the suffrages of the living the way fresh water meets thirst. And when they receive a suffrage, accompanied by a sacramental seal at the exact place of passage, that suffrage reaches them twice over. A direct help to the soul, and a relief that translates into progress within the purgative process. The soul of your departed loved one, according to the constant teaching of the Magisterium, moves forward toward the fullness of light with every Mass offered for it, with every alms given in its name, with every penance lived with its intention in mind. The medal placed on the headboard alongside the prayer of the living multiplies that progress. And here comes the most beautiful passage in all of Teresian spirituality on the communion between the living and the dead. It's in the interior castle, in the seventh mansions, in the chapter where Saint Teresa of Jesus speaks of the spiritual marriage of the soul with Christ. And she says something that few commentators underline. She says that the soul that has arrived at the last mansion concerns itself with the other souls, those of the living and those of the dead, with a charity that becomes almost physical, that the soul transformed by Christ intercedes for her brothers and sisters as though they stood right in front of her, and that this intercession, made from the center of the heart united to Christ, carries a particular weight before God's mercy. What she described on those pages is exactly what happens when you, in your own home, make the gesture we have been speaking about. You are not a soul in the seventh mansions, neither am I. But the intention of caring for a departed loved one out of love and out of faith is already an act of charity that the Church calls a suffrage. And that suffrage, made with a sacramental blessed by the Church herself, becomes written into the spiritual fabric of the communion of saints. Your departed loved one receives the grace. You receive the peace. And between the two of you, a bridge of prayer is built that no longer breaks, not even when you forget about it for a moment, because the metal stays there doing its job while you sleep, while you work, while you live. There is a detail you should know because simple souls often wonder about it. How will I know that my departed loved one is really receiving this benefit? Saint Teresa of Jesus was very prudent with that question. She used to say that the soul that is at peace doesn't need constant outward proofs. She used to say that faith holds up what the eyes do not see. But she also used to say that the very interior peace of the one who makes the gesture, sustained over time, week after week, without dramatic ups and downs, was already sign enough. If you, after making this gesture on July 11th, find within yourself a lasting calm, a new serenity when praying for him, an unexpected ease in forgiving small resentments you'd been holding on to since his death, that is the sign. That sign is enough. There is still one thing left to resolve. We still need to clear up what happens for the people listening to this right now, who are thinking, with a knot in the throat, that this gesture is impossible for them. Because the bed of their departed loved one no longer exists. Because the room was sold along with the house. Because the death happened miles away in an intensive care unit with no family member able to even be present. Those modern cases, painful and common, also have a solution. And the solution also comes from the careful hand of Saint Teresa of Jesus, who already back then, in the 16th century, anticipated similar situations for the souls of sisters of hers who died on the roads of Castile during the long pilgrimages of the Reform. You'll come to understand those cases in what follows. Let's go case by case, slowly. Each case belongs to someone listening right now with a tight heart, thinking this teaching is out of her reach. None of them is out of reach. First case. Your departed loved one died in a hospital, in a nursing home, in an intensive care unit far from home. Maybe during the pandemic, during a trip, in an accident that left you no chance for a goodbye. In that case, the physical place of his soul's passage is outside your home, and unless you have free access to that hospital room, it is outside your ability to seal it. Saint Teresa of Jesus taught for these cases a spiritual principle you ought to know. She said, in a paraphrase preserved by Mother Ana de Jesus, that when the physical place of the passage is inaccessible, the equivalent place valid for the suffrages is the spot where that person used to sleep when she was in her own home. The marriage bed, if she was married. The bed in his room, if he was a son or daughter still living with you. The main bedroom of the house where she felt protected. That headboard works as a full substitute within Teresian spiritual doctrine for the exact place of the hospital passage. Second case. The room was remodeled, the bed was sold. You threw out the old headboard during some renovation. The flooring was changed, the furniture vanished. In this case, a different principle applies. What remains intact is the physical space of the air, the volume of the room, the load-bearing walls. And within that volume remains the exact point on the ceiling and on the floor where the headboard stood. Locate that point in your mind. If you have old photographs of the room, they'll help you pin it down. And you place the medal on the wall closest to that remembered point, at the approximate height where the original headboard was. The sacramental grace doesn't depend on a wooden headboard. It depends on the physical point in space that received the passage. And that point, for the most part, remains intact, even if you've changed the furniture 3 times. Third case. You all sold the entire house where your departed loved one lived. Now you live in another home, in another town, in another country even. His bed belongs to strangers, his room to another family. Here Saint Teresa of Jesus gave a directive almost nobody remembers, preserved in a letter from 1573 to her niece Maria de Ocampo. She said that when the physical place is at an unreachable distance, the seal is moved to the spot in your current home where you usually pray for that departed loved one. your prayer corner, the wall facing your kneeler, the space that holds your rosaries for him. There is where the medal goes. Because there is, right now, the living presence of your departed loved one in your spiritual life. And there is where your prayer is building week after week, the bridge that nourishes him in purgatory. Fourth case. The departed loved one you grieve died decades ago. Maybe you were a child when your grandfather went home. Maybe you lost your father 30 years ago. Maybe you barely remember the room where it all happened. In that case, the same principle from the third case applies, with a small adjustment. The living memory of your departed loved one after all these years already has a usual anchor in some specific place of your current home. Look around you. Where do you keep his photo, his old rosary, his prayer book, his favorite holy card? That corner, built with love over the years, is already a household altar, even if you don't call it one. And the headboard of your medal goes over that corner, on the highest wall, where it remains worthily visible. Fifth case. You have several departed loved ones for whom you pray at the same time. Your father and your mother. Your husband and a child. 3 brothers you lost. The medal can be a single one if you pronounce the names one after the other during the fastening prayer, joining them in memory as a single family. Or it can be several medals, placed each on the corresponding headboard if you still keep the rooms of each one. Either of the 2 options works within the Catholic doctrine of sacramentals. What counts is the faith of the one who places it and the blessing of the priest over the sacramental. And there is a 6th case, which carries a depth all its own. The woman, or the man, who lost a newborn child, the baby who left without ever taking a breath, the son or daughter who died in the womb. For those souls, as preserved in letters from Saint Teresa of Jesus to Mother Brianda de San Jose in 1578, the valid place is the crib that had been prepared, or if there was no crib, the side of the parent's bed where the baby would have slept during her first months. If there was never a crib or a prepared bed, the corner of the living room where the mother used to rest her hand on her belly most often will do. Those little ones, Saint Teresa of Jesus said in words preserved by her nuns, are handed back to God through a door so clean it hardly needs a seal. But the seal infinitely consoles the parents who remain. I'm telling you this plainly. Whatever your case may be, there's a place for your medal, and that place works, spiritually, the same as the original headboard. What counts, for God and for the saints, is the intention to care for your departed loved one out of love and out of the faith of the Church, far beyond the exact millimeter of the wood. That intention, sustained with a blessed sacramental, opens heaven to the prayer you had been lifting up for so long with a weight you no longer had any reason to carry. There is still one important thing to tell you. A concrete promise that Saint Teresa of Jesus left in writing about what happens inside the home and inside the soul of the departed loved one when this gesture is made with faith. There is a page in The Way of Perfection that very few readers have underlined attentively across the centuries. It is in the chapter where Saint Teresa of Jesus speaks of the way the souls that love one another well inside the Church help one another, the living and the departed alike, forming a single current that rises and falls without ceasing between heaven, purgatory, and the land of those of us still walking here. And on that page, near the end of the chapter, there's a very concrete promise she leaves written for those who decide to care for their departed loved ones with blessed sacramentals placed at the points of passage. The promise works in 2 directions at once. It works upward toward the soul of your departed loved one, and it works downward toward your own home and your own peace. Begin with the side of the soul of your departed loved one. When you place that medal on the headboard, with the priest's blessing, with the prayer spoken slowly, with the name of your departed loved one said in a low voice, you open on his behalf a channel that Catholic doctrine calls extraordinary suffrage. That is a specific help added on top of everything else you are already doing for him. The masses you arrange will still reach him. The alms you give in his name will still reach him. The rosaries you pray will still reach him. And on top of all those currents, the current of the fixed sacramental remains flowing permanently. That of the steel at the place of passage, working day and night without your having to think about it every moment. It is like having a candle lit in the sky of your home that doesn't need a wick. An invisible candle that burns for him while you work, while you eat, while you sleep, while you live. The soul of your departed loved one, according to the constant teaching of the magisterium that Saint Teresa of Jesus gathered into her mystical writings, receives that current the way one drinks gentle water that dissolves the last resistances of the purgative process. If he is in purgatory, he advances. If he is already in heaven, he intercedes with more strength for the living who remember him, which increases the grace you yourself receive through his new intercession. The circle closes. Both directions work at the same time. You help him, he helps you. The medal stays in its place, and the communion of saints becomes, inside your own home, a palpable reality. Now move to the side of your home. That is what very few people imagine when they begin this gesture. The medal placed at the headboard of the departed loved one, blessed with the specific rite, helps the soul in the next life, and at the same time keeps watch over the physical space where the trace of the passage remained. And that watching, according to the letters of Saint Teresa of Jesus, preserved to her prioresses, benefits those who go on living under the same roof. This includes spiritual protection at night within the room. It includes the gradual dissolution of that heaviness you used to feel crossing the doorway. It includes a new ease in finding the words of prayer when you walk into that room. It includes, in many cases documented in the convent chronicles, an unexpected peace that spreads from that room out to the rest of the home, like a warm current that flows in when the right door is opened. And now comes the part that most astonishes those who discover it. This gesture, made once with true faith, doesn't expire. The priest's blessing over the sacramental remains as long as the physical sacramental remains in its place. The medal stays there doing its job for years, for decades. If the ribbon wears out, you tie it with a new ribbon. If the nail falls out, you fasten it again carefully. If the children inherit the house and the room, you leave behind a short note, folded neatly inside a drawer, explaining what that medal is, who had it blessed, for whom it was put there, and why. That way the chain of prayer carries on generation after generation without breaking at the moment of the family handover. Saint Teresa of Jesus, in a letter to Mother Inés de Jesus, preserved in the archive of Salamanca, said in her own words that these small sacramental seals placed with faith lasted as long as the faith of those who inherited them lasted. And faith, in a Catholic family that prays, is inherited the way a last name is inherited. There is one more detail that closes this teaching, and it is something many older women who have made this gesture report to their spiritual directors with a shy smile. The peace that comes into the room after placing the medal, with time, stops needing the medal. That is, the room slowly heals until the sacramental remains there as a grateful keepsake more than as a necessity. Prayer for the departed loved one continues. Grace continues flowing in both directions, but the weight of the place, which was what kept you from walking in calmly, is now only the weight of a gentle memory, and that weight, yes, you will want to keep. I wanted to tell you all of this before we say goodbye, because it is good for you to arrive at July 11 with the certainty of someone who knows what she is doing and why, the certainty that the gesture is small and the promise is great, the certainty that your departed loved one is going to receive what you promised him without knowing how to give it to him, and that you yourself are going to receive, without having asked for it, a peace that had been missing for years in a particular corner of your own home. That certainty now you already carry inside you. And in just a little while, we are going to say goodbye with the calm of those who have walked a whole road together, without rushing, without darkness, without urgency hurrying the words. All that remains is to say farewell to you with a woman's blessing to a woman, friend to friend. And I am going to do that right now. It tells me that your love for the one who left isn't satisfied with the usual. It tells me that when something inside you sensed a piece was missing, you didn't look away the way so many do. You stayed. You listened to the whole journey through. And that, believe me, has a deep reason behind it. It's exactly what your departed loved one needed you to do today. You now know what few Catholics know. You know there is a specific place inside your home that holds a trace of the last passage. You know that trace has a name, has a history, has 1,500 years of church tradition behind it. You know who the man was who, as a boy, fled Rome so as not to lose himself, who lived 3 years in a cave, who shattered a poisoned jug with the simple sign of the cross, and who ended up giving his name to the most powerful medal that exists against evil in the whole Catholic sacramental tradition. You know that Saint Teresa of Jesus, with that practical wisdom that only comes from years of deep prayer and the guidance of souls, taught her nuns to care for exactly that point, the headboard of the bed where a soul separated from its body, with the seal of Saint Benedict blessed by the Church. And you know the whole gesture, the authentic medal with its engraved letters carrying the most ancient exorcism of Christendom, the specific priestly blessing, without which the object remains a simple ornament, the exact placement over the headboard with the face of the cross looking out into the room and the figure of the saint keeping watch toward the wall. The prayer spoken slowly, with the name of your departed loved one said in a low voice while your fingers finish fastening the blessed metal. And you also know, because I told you with calm and without leaving anyone out, that there is a valid place for every case, every story, every loss, so that no one listening to this is left thinking her particular situation has no remedy. You carry with you, from now on, something many devout Catholics search for over years without finding. A concrete way, approved by doctrine, taught by a saint, the Church raises to the altars and recognizes as a doctor, of closing that feeling of incomplete prayer that weighed so heavily on your chest. You no longer have to wonder whether you did enough. You no longer have to glance sideways at that door in the hallway with a tight heart. On July 11th, with the feast of St. Benedict lighting up the entire liturgical calendar, you are going to walk into that room with the blessed medal between your hands, and you are going to seal what had been left ajar for so long. Your departed loved one is going to feel it. So are you. And that feeling, believe me, is not easily forgotten because it stays engraved in the body and in the soul the way any act of true love made with full awareness stays engraved. Stay with me a moment longer, because before we say goodbye, I want to talk to you about something that has to do with that same faithfulness that brought you to the end of this journey. What you have just heard didn't come about by chance. It came out of years of study on the life and writings of Saint Teresa of Jesus, hours dedicated to tracing through her letters, her books, the chronicles of her convents, the details that most of those who talk about her never bother to look for. And that same care, that same faithfulness to the truth of her teaching is present in every one of the other journeys that have been made with her voice and her doctrine as a guide. I want you to think about something for a moment before this voice that has accompanied you all this time closes. If this teaching about the medal and the headboard touched you the way it seems to have touched you, if you felt something inside you loosen while you listened, it is very likely that your heart is also asking for other answers you haven't found yet. Because the death of a loved one doesn't leave a single question unanswered. It leaves dozens, small ones, big ones, some you haven't even dared to put into words out loud in front of your own confessor. Do you know, for instance, What Saint Teresa of Jesus taught about the signs a departed loved one may send to those of us still walking on this earth, and how to tell a true sign from a simple illusion of grief. Do you know what she wrote about the exact moment when a soul stops needing our prayers because it has already reached the full vision of God, and how to recognize in your own spiritual life the hints that this has happened with the one you grieve? Do you know what objects besides the Benedict medal she taught us to place in homes to keep watch over entire families, over all the living who go on under the same roof, night after night, far beyond any one particular departed loved one? There are answers to all of that. Documented answers, faithful to Catholic doctrine, born from the same patient searching that gave rise to what you have just heard today. And those answers are waiting for you right now, somewhere very close to where you are at this moment, with no effort on your part, without your having to leave where you are. It's enough that when this voice finishes, you let your own spiritual curiosity guide you toward whatever is next that your soul needs to hear. Because that is how true faith works. One question answered opens the way to the next, and each answer brings you a little closer to the full peace you have been searching for so long, for yourself and for your loved ones. Think of everything you've discovered just in this little while we have spent together. Before we began, you didn't even know there was a specific place inside your home that was asking for this care. Now you know it, you understand it, and within a few days, you are going to live it with your own hands. That same thing, exactly, is what happens each time you stop to listen with an open heart to a new teaching on Saint Teresa of Jesus. Something that was darkness becomes light. Something that was a question without an answer becomes a concrete gesture you can make today with your own hands for the people you love. And that transformation, small but real, is what builds, journey after journey, a spiritual life that grows steadier, calmer, closer, each time to the saint you so admire. Think too of the people you know, of that sister of yours who lost her husband 2 years ago and still hasn't found consolation. Of that friend from the Rosary group who has been asking you for months, almost in whispers, what can be done for a father who died without confession? Of that neighbor who lights candles without quite knowing why she does it, only because someone once told her that helps the departed loved ones, without ever fully understanding the reason behind the gesture. Each one of those women needs exactly what you have just received today: a clear explanation, grounded in the doctrine of the Church, born from the wisdom of a saint who understood these things better than almost anyone in the history of Christianity. Sharing what you've just learned with that sister, with that friend, with that neighbor is in itself an act of spiritual charity. It is exactly the kind of work of mercy that Saint Teresa of Jesus practiced all her life, teaching those near her what she herself had learned in her own prayer. And while you do it, while you share this teaching with the people you love, I invite you to keep going deeper yourself. Because the spiritual life never stops at a single truth discovered. It keeps growing, keeps branching out, keeps drawing you toward deeper corners of the faith you have professed since you were a child. There are more teachings of Saint Teresa of Jesus waiting to be discovered. There are more concrete gestures, more sacramentals, more documented prayers she left for those who, like you, love their departed loved ones with a faithfulness that doesn't tire and doesn't give up. Every one of those teachings is built with the same care, the same faithfulness to the sources, the same deep respect for Catholic doctrine that brought you today to this exact point of the journey. Let this stirring, this thirst to keep learning about your faith and about the care of your departed loved ones simply stay with you in the next minutes, in the next hours, as you decide what you are going to do with the rest of your day, without urgency, without any pressure. And when you feel that small inner call, that gentle nudge of wanting to know a little more, trust it. Trust that this stirring is also a form of prayer. a way of telling God that you want to keep caring well for the souls you love with all the truth the church has stored up for you. Before I go, I want to thank you from my heart for the patience with which you listened to me today, for the faith with which you received every word, for the love you showed toward your departed loved one each time you decide to invest your time in learning to care for him better from this side of life. That love does not go unnoticed by God. That love is, in itself, a constant prayer, silent, rising straight up like a column of incense toward heaven, every minute of the day, even when you are no longer consciously thinking about it. Now, before I say goodbye altogether, I want to leave you with the words Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote near the end of her life, words she herself spoke often when she felt that a day or a work was reaching its natural close, words that have held up the faith of countless generations who walked through sorrows very similar to yours. In her own words, she said, "Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you, who has God lacks nothing, for God alone suffices." Those words, written by her own hand, have consoled whole generations of Catholics who, like you, were searching for peace in the middle of pain and uncertainty. Carry that certainty with you tonight. Carry the peace of knowing you have made, today, an act of true love towards someone who is no longer with you physically, but who remains in a real and deep way joined to you by the invisible bonds of faith and prayer. Your departed loved one thanks you for it, even though you can't hear him with the ears of the body. And God, who sees everything done out of the sincerest love, also thanks you for it, today and always. May the peace of Christ dwell in your heart tonight and every night that follows. May Saint Teresa of Jesus intercede for you and for all your departed loved ones before the throne of God. May Saint Benedict keep watch over your home with his powerful cross, driving every evil away and drawing every grace in every corner, at every door, at every window that opens to the outside. And may you, when you close your eyes tonight, feel in your chest that calm that only comes with a duty fulfilled out of true love. Rest in peace, beloved soul who is listening. And rest in peace also all the departed loved ones for whom today, without quite knowing it, you have prayed once again with a heart a little more whole. May God bless you, keep you, and bring you together with your loved ones to the light that has no setting, to the home where there are no more tears or separation, where entire families come together again forever in the full presence of the Father. Amen.